clear, Martyn, when does all this start?
Well, it starts today, so we've announced the new policy. So I suppose the simplest way I could say it would be that whatever contract a player's in today, that's the contract that in effect is protected. When that contract expires, if the player has less than 60 caps and they're playing outside Wales, then they wouldn't be eligible for selection. If they got 60 or more caps and they're outside Wales, then they would be. So we want to be really definitive on that. The existing policy worked to an extent, but it hasn't worked well enough.
What was wrong with it?
I think it was quite complicated. You know, so we want to make it a little bit simpler, and I think it had so many clauses in it to try and cater for every eventuality. So we've tried to step back and say, let's try and simplify this, make it understandable for players, make it understandable for supporters, and then try and give each of the 5 entities access to the players that they need. So, you know, we've been working across the whole summer. We've come to a point where we think we've got something that can work in the environment that we've got.
For me as a national coach, if I was being perfectly selfish, would I have a policy? No, I wouldn't. But it's not about me or the national team. It's about what's the best for Welsh rugby. And the best thing for Welsh rugby and for the union to support the regions is to how do we try and keep a number of our best players in Wales for as long as we possibly can. We know we're under pressure from market forces and those sorts of things. And as Martyn said, you know, the previous policy was pretty complicated, and this new policy is pretty much black and white.
Which brings us to the 60 test mark. Get 60 caps, you have licence to go.
Yeah, well, you've got that opportunity, and if we've done a good enough job when a player reaches 60 and maybe they're on national dual contracts and they're settled and they're happy and they've been well paid and looked after. And the thing about national dual contracts is the limited number of games that you've got for your region, the amount of time you get in an off season. You know, we're looking at introducing another couple of things in national dual contracts that are going to be a benefit to the players as well. So we've got to make sure that we don't cut our nose off to spite our face in terms of closing everything down.
But as with all policies, Martyn, there are those areas. You do the sums. There are players who can't get to 60 caps and have the freedom to move before the World Cup.
Yeah, I think, you know, like with any policy, it affects some players differently to how it affects others. I think just to go back on the old policy, the whole wild card thing, you know, we know players back themselves. You know, we've probably lost a few more players than we might have expected because they all back themselves and believe they'll get the wild card, and some people do and some people don't. I was worried about World Cup here, so, you know, we're down to 2 wild cards there. That doesn't work. You know, we want to go there with a Welsh team that's competitive, so I think limiting ourselves to 2 wasn't the right thing. We actually hope that the certainty actually is a good thing in the cold light of day.
Did you not have to gulp, though, to take this short-term hit in order that the long-term looks more secure?
And that's the thing, that's the whole thing about, you know, it's about a partnership, it's about us working together, it's about me not making the decisions that are selfish decisions just for the national team, just for myself, just for us as coaches. What's the long-term benefit of Welsh rugby? And supporting the game and supporting the regions and supporting the development of the game. And, you know, I can look myself in the mirror and say, you know, I think we're a part of trying to do that. You know, it's and it's important. You know, I think you've got to take a conscious view about what is the best for the game. And we think there's a policy at the moment that at the right time, it's got the balance. Are there going to be pressures, external pressures? Yes. And we're going to have to deal with that sort of going in the future. And like I said, we've got a challenge. All of us have to do a job within the union and the regions to get this right.
If you're putting together the packages of good pastoral care and player welfare and whatever, you're still up against the beast of what comes in from France and from England as cash.
I think we're well aware of that, but you know, I think we've had good examples in recent years where players have been to France, and I personally, you know, whether people disagree, I don't think there's been a massive improvement or an improvement in their rugby development, and I'd argue that sometimes they've come back not as, you know, as good players as when they left Wales, but also an opportunity to lengthen their career as well. You know, that we're looking after some of our top players with the national dual contracts and proper pre-season, limiting the number of games they're playing, some exposure. I spoke that potentially adding a few more benefits to the national dual contracts as well.
If Martyn can look at the long term, Warren, you have immediate matters to deal with. Is there any chance that this will have an impact on the autumn series in November?
Thinking about players who are coming out of contract, what potentially their decisions are. The ones that are playing outside of Wales, are they going to be moving back to Wales? So, I think in the next few weeks there's a few, potentially a couple of tough decisions to make, but hopefully those get ironed out. But like going back to the policy, we think that this is a policy that's easier for people to understand. Yes, we know there's sometimes going to be a bit of pain always when you put things in place. There's going to be a little bit of ambiguity. There's going to be one or two players that might get caught up in the crossfire, so to speak. But we potentially have got to work through that, take a hit on that, and hopefully that fits purpose in terms of what we're trying to do.
Martyn, I mean, the questions are going to be about Rhys Webb and Dan Biggar, and your determination to face that hard choice that here are two players that may not be available for the World Cup.
Warren and I do these jobs because we want any team. It could be a region, it could be a club side, it could be Wales. We want to win in the competitions we're in, but we're not. We're paid to make difficult choices sometimes, and this could be difficult for one or two players. Wherever you draw the line, there'll always be one or two players who are on the wrong side of that line. But I think we've talked about transparency and being honest about the things that we do and why we do them, and that's what we're trying to do here. We've been picked off a little bit over the years in terms of players going, so we're getting a little bit tougher on that and saying that we need you in Wales if you're going to play for Wales.
Has it been spelled out to all the players that there will be pain?
Yeah, so we talked to the players. We wanted to involve them in the process. They understand it. I think the certainty is welcomed, but we just got to make sure that for them that if you've got less than 60 caps and we're asking you to play in Wales, then it needs to be the right environment. We need to make sure we look after them financially, and they want some assurances from us that we'll do our best to make that happen. So I think that's fair game from them.
This will fall over if we don't have a number of successful competitive regions and the national team isn't doing well, and that puts pressure back on us. That puts pressure back on the unions, and that puts pressure on the regions to get things right and create an environment and be competitive and make sure that the players are happy and are reasonably successful, so they want to stay in Wales. And we need to be accountable to make sure that we're all upholding our responsibilities to making sure that we keep the best players in Wales and attract the best players to come to Wales.